Can you be in an abusive relationship with your future self? Well, you can. You know how toxic people give you just enough attention to kind of keep you hooked, but never enough to make you feel secure? Well, plot twist. You're doing the exact same thing to yourself when it comes to your goals and your dreams. And I'm serious about this. You're breadcrumbing your own potential. And it's time we actually talked about this, about why you're in an emotionally abusive relationship with your future self. Welcome back to Huddle Psychology, where we get uncomfortably real about the stuff that's going on in your head. I'm Rahul Nair, and we are here to decode the psychology behind why we do the weird things we actually end up doing. All right, so let's set this up properly. We all know what breadcrumbing looks like in relationships. In fact, one of our earlier videos was all about the psychological manipulation technique called breadcrumbing. It's basically someone gives you just enough attention to keep you interested, but never enough to make you feel secure. They text you sporadically, make kind of vague plans, they show interest only when you start pulling away. And then they disappear again. It's basically a psychological manipulation technique that keeps you hooked while giving them all the power. Now, here's what's wild. Most of us are doing this exact same thing to ourselves with respect to our goals, our creative projects, and our life dreams. Let me make you understand that a little bit more clearly. You give your writing project just enough attention to keep the dream alive, but never enough to make real progress. You research that business idea obsessively, but never take any concrete steps. You talk about your goals constantly, but somehow never have time to work on them. You're keeping yourself in a state of perpetual possibility without ever committing to actual achievement. And just like relationship breadcrumbing, it's designed to avoid vulnerability of real commitment while maintaining the fantasy of eventual success. And let me tell you, this whole thing applies as much as it applies to you as it applies to me. It applies to me as much as it applies to you. I've been through this situation myself, and I can be absolutely candid, therefore, about talking about it. All right, so let's break down some of the key concepts for us to better understand what we are talking about and the psychology behind it. Breadcrumbing works because it provides what we call, and we've discussed this many times before, intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward cycle known to psychology. You get enough positive feedback to keep going, but not enough to feel really satisfied or secure. That's what intermittent reinforcement is all about. And when you breadcrumb your own dreams, you're essentially in a toxic relationship with your future self. And this is how it really starts showing up in your life. Your number one, my number one point is the dream research addiction. It's a very interesting couple of words. You can be addicted to so many things. You can also be addicted to dream research. You're researching about your dreams. You spend hours watching those YouTube videos about your goal, reading books about success, following accounts related to your dream. All of this feels very productive. It feels productive and gives you the emotional satisfaction of progress without actual risk or effort. Your brain treats learning about the thing as doing the thing, when really it's not the same thing. So that's point number one, dream research addiction. Point number two, planning perfectionism. You create elaborate plans. Trust me, I've been there. Mood boards, vision boards, detailed timelines. Planning feels like progress, and it kind of gives you that dopamine hit, but it's just another way to avoid the messy reality of actually starting something. The perfect plans that we put together are kind of protecting us from imperfect execution. Third point, conditional commitment. Oh, I'll start when I have more time, more money, more confidence, more knowledge, and on and on and on. And all of these conditions rarely get met because they're not really about external circumstances. They're about avoiding the vulnerability of trying and possibly failing. That's the reality. The conditions are a way to keep the dream alive while never being accountable for any results. Fourth point, social media performing. You post about your goals. You share motivational content. You talk about your dreams publicly. This gives you social validation, and it gives you some kind of accountability pressure, which kind of feels like some kind of momentum as far as your project is concerned. But often, this kind of social performance replaces any actual work because you've already gotten the reward in the form of attention and encouragement, the likes and the comments and the hearts. You've got all that without making any effort, without actually doing anything. So, the psychological function here is very, very clear. Self-breadcrumbing lets you maintain the identity and hope associated with your dreams without the risk and discomfort of actually pursuing them seriously. That's what it's all about. It's a way to feel like someone who has big dreams. Feel like someone who has got big dreams without being someone who takes big risks. How do they really match up? But here's the cost. There's a real cost to this, to doing this to yourself. And that cost is, unfortunately, chronic disappointment in yourself. A growing gap between who you say you are and what you actually do. And then comes the slow erosion of trust in your own commitments. That's the cost you pay. That's the price you pay for self sabotage or self breadcrumbing. So, having said all that, how do you stop this from happening and actually start committing to your goals? Let me offer you 3 strategies once again. Point number 1, strategy number 1, the action to research ratio. Now, for every hour you spend doing research and planning or consuming content about your goal, spend 2 hours doing some actual work towards it. For every hour you do research, do 2 hours of actual work towards making things happen. Reading about writing is not writing. Watching business videos is not the same thing as building a business. And learning about fitness is not the same thing as exercising. So you need to be reminded, and you need to remind yourself that information without implementation is, well, how can I put it? Just a sophisticated form of procrastination. All right. Second strategy, and that is minimum viable commitment. In the world of startups, we talk about the idea of the minimum viable product, and this is very similar to that. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions to come about, ask, what's the smallest thing I could do today that would constitute some kind of real progress towards your goal, towards achieving your goal? Then do that thing consistently. Consistency with small actions builds way more momentum than sporadic attempts at perfect execution. Your goal is to become someone who follows through, not necessarily someone who starts big and starts with a bang. And finally, the third strategy, build a results based identity. So stop identifying with your intentions. Rather, start identifying with your actions. So instead of saying, I'm someone who wants to write a book, try saying, I'm someone who writes for 15 minutes every day. Instead of saying, I'm going to start a business, you might want to try, I'm someone who takes one concrete business step or business action per week, something that's measurable. So let your identity follow your behavior rather than the other way around. So here's the hard truth, and this might be a little difficult for us to stomach, but I've got to say it. Self-breadcrumbing often stems from a fear of finding out that you're not as capable as you hoped. You're not as capable as you hoped. It's safer to maintain the possibility of greatness, right? It's safer to maintain the possibility of greatness than to risk discovering your limitations. But My friend, potential unexpressed becomes regret. Potential unexpressed becomes regret. And I have to say that from my own experience, regret is much more painful than temporary loss or failure. Regret is a lot more painful than temporary loss or failure. You can always get back up and try again, but not trying will be a regret, which will be a lot more painful. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. Also, notice if you're addicted. Notice if you're addicted to the emotional high, and I've experienced this myself, and therefore I can be candid about this. The emotional high of starting new things. Some people breadcrumb multiple dreams simultaneously, jumping from project to project to project. Every time the honeymoon phase ends and the real work is just about to start, they jump. They jump. It happens. If this sounds familiar, then you might need to practice commitment skills, not just goal setting skills. You might be really good at setting goals, but you need to practice commitment skills as well. So, here's the homework for this week. Pick one goal, just one goal you've been breadcrumbing for a while. For the next week, for the coming week, spend zero time researching and planning and talking about it. No. Instead, take one direct action towards achieving your goal. That goal which you have been breadcrumbing for a while. Even if it's imperfect, that's okay. Even if it's small, that's okay. See how different it feels to do something instead of thinking about doing something. And I've experienced this myself. See how it feels, see how different it feels to actually do something instead of thinking about doing that thing. And please, it's a request that you be honest, absolutely and brutally honest with yourself about whether you actually want to achieve that goal or not. Or is it just that you like the identity of being someone who has that goal? Be honest about that. Be honest. Ask yourself if you really want to achieve this goal, or do you like the identity associated with someone who has this goal? They're two different things. Sometimes self breadcrumbing is your subconscious or unconscious way of telling you this is actually not something that you want. That may be what is happening, but it's for you to reflect on. I'll leave it at that as far as self-sabotage and self-breadcrumbing is concerned. So do a lot of reflection. Ask yourself, commit to an exercise for a week or two. Take an action towards actually achieving a goal that you have been breadcrumbing for a while, keeping aside your research and thinking and talking. Do something. And ask yourself if you genuinely want to achieve that, or do you simply like the identity of someone who has that goal in mind? Something for you to reflect on. So that's for this session. And next week we dive into another topic called spiritual bypassing. When wellness culture becomes toxic. We'll explore how positive thinking can actually harm your mental health and why your favorite self help guru might be doing more damage than good. Coming back to today's session, that's next week. Let me know in the comments as far as this week's content is concerned. Drop a few comments. What's one thing that you've been breadcrumbing instead of actually pursuing? Let's try and normalize this gap between our intentions and our actions so that we can all start closing in on it, so that we are more action oriented than simply dream oriented. And as always, if you want to know more about it, about all the topics that we covered in this session, head over to our blog, huddlepsychology.substack.com, for the full research breakdown. Need to talk through one-on-one? Then simply hit me on rahul@huddlepsychology.com. I'll try and reach back to you as quickly as I can. And before I leave you, I want to leave you with a note about my new book that came out last month, which is titled Already Home, Advaita Vedanta for Everyday Living. It's my first book, my debut offering. It's available as a Kindle book across all Amazon marketplaces, and a paperback edition is available in the UK and in the US. So I'd be immensely grateful if you support my first book and my debut offering, my humble offering. So until next time, keep huddling, keep growing. Ciao for now.